Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, Retail Rewired, Scaling Tech to Serve Customers Better Everywhere. We're excited you could join us for today's session. My name is Megan Billingsley, and I'll be moderating our discussion. I think we can all agree that retailers managing multiple locations are approaching a make or break moment. And here's what I mean. They need to modernize to stay relevant and profitable, but operational and technological obstacles stand in their way of transformation. Today, we're going over results from a recent survey where retail leaders told us about their operational and strategic challenges, their approach to technology and digital transformation, and the role edge computing plays in improving business performance. And we'll help put these statistics in context so you can benchmark your own strategy, spot areas for improvement, and gain practical insights to drive growth. First, just a few housekeeping items to cover. The slides you see will advance automatically throughout the presentation. To enlarge them, click the Enlarge Slides button in the top right corner of your presentation window. If you need technical assistance, click on the Help widget located in the bottom left corner of your screen. We encourage you to submit questions at any time throughout the presentation using the Q&A widget at the bottom of your screen. We'll be answering some of these questions toward the end of our conversation today. I'm excited to welcome two experts for today's discussion. Please say hello to Richard Newman from Scale Computing and Ron Thurston, well-known author, keynote speaker, podcast host, and retail advisor. Richard, would you introduce yourself to our audience?
Absolutely, thank you. So I'm the Chief Strategy Officer for Scale Computing. I joined Scale a few years ago when they acquired my company, which was Reliant. We are a leading provider of edge computing within the retail and hospitality space. In fact, I think by most counts, we probably are the leader in terms of number of deployments. And we've been doing this for a while, even before edge computing was a term. Originally started our business at our first production installations going all the way back to 2008.
Thank you for being here. And Ron.
Thank you, Megan. Some longtime retail field executive. I am the stores guy in this conversation with Richard. And so running brands like Saint Laurent for North and South America, West Elm, Bonobos, Tory Burch, Apple, and so on. And have a couple of podcasts and a couple of books, and excited to be here and speak about my favorite topic, which is retail and field impact.
Excellent. Thank you so much for taking the time to be with us today. So with that, then, let's get started. I'd like to begin to unpack this new research, which uncovers how multi-location retailers are adapting for scalable growth and why 2025 marks a pivot point for operational and technology leaders in retail. First, Richard, could you tell us a little about the survey?
Absolutely. So we commissioned a survey which ended up reaching out and connecting with about 150 operational and technology executives across a range of retailers, from the very largest global retailers all the way down to folks that were really running just a small handful of stores. But the messaging we got back, regardless of size and regardless of retail category, was really quite consistent. Everyone feels like they need to spend more on tech. And this has actually been consistent when you look year over year. Tech spending in retail is almost always up. And that's because there's just an ongoing drive to transform, to build. It's obviously retail by nature is a competitive landscape, and both our customers and the industry at large is always looking for ways to better compete, to better serve their customers. But there are problems along the way. So there's operational challenges, and there's problems with consistency in terms of the customer experience that technology has. And some of this has to do with the fact that some of the changes that we see in the industry are not incremental, but some of them are quite transformational. We're in a time and place right now where we're seeing a sea change. It's a paradigm shift in terms of the types of applications and how those applications are built or deployed. We're actually at a moment right now where traditional, sort of standard client server-based applications are being replaced with new cloud-based infrastructure. And cloud, of course, does not serve the needs of the physical store on its own. There's technology components which run locally, and there needs to be a new way to deliver those. Of course, part of what our thesis is that edge computing fills that gap. But deploying these technologies, again, which tend to be new, which tend often to have great promise. Some of them are AI and ML based. You end up with challenges. You have challenges supporting legacy, which we see 41% of our respondents say they struggle with costs they didn't expect, because a lot of it has to do with outdated process and outdated infrastructure, which you can't snap your fingers and make go away. So a lot of times, some of that we see is the old having to meet the new. And then the new also, isn't necessarily managed, deployed, or implemented the same way. So there's operational challenges in terms of how do you actually get this stuff rolled out. And 33%, we're quick to jump up and say, hey, there's a lot of promise to this stuff, but it's been a challenge for us. So this all leads to, again, in the large scheme of things, opportunity for better mousetraps, but it also, when we look at how to address these issues, you've got to be able to speak to them very specifically.
Excellent, thank you. Ron, does this data mirror your on-the-ground client work?
It really does. I love how Richard kind of describes this idea of the budgets and the spend go up. The challenge that retailers are often sharing with me through visits and interviewing them on podcasts and on stage is, the customer expectations are exceeding where retail moves. So there's so much happening around AI, around speed of efficiencies, around new technologies. And so the world is training the customer to expect something that maybe the store can't deliver yet. And retail has notoriously been on the slower side to adopt new technology. And so the customer is expecting things like, well, I don't understand why you don't know where the inventory is. I don't understand why I can't get it tomorrow, or that POS is down, or that you don't know my name as a top customer. There's a list of things that I think the customer is often confused, because we digitally are living in this world where there's just a lot of insight into how we live and shop. And I don't know that all retailers and hospitality businesses have kept up at the same pace.
Excellent insights. Thank you so much. Can I ask, why is there so much urgency to adapt for scalable growth right now? Like, what's pushing retailers to act more quickly today than ever before to stay competitive and profitable? I'd love to hear from you both here, but Richard, why don't we start with you?
Yeah, absolutely. So, we've seen some really significant changes. I think the pandemic and COVID was quite a shock to the system. There was a lot of talk, even previously to that, to what they talked about, sort of the retail apocalypse and how the world was going to move to a real online only world. But, that's never really happened. We still have the majority of commerce still takes place within the brick and mortar locations. And, customers expect to be able to walk into their favorite stores and have a delightful experience. But at the same time, there's increased, requirements around integration of the online and the physical world. They expect to be able to buy things online. They expect to be able to return them in store. They expect to be able to walk into stores, to be able to find the products that they want. And if they're not there, they want them delivered right away. And there's been a wholesale, requirement to adapt existing retail systems to fit that new world. And it is challenging, because the pace of change, as we've all seen, for cloud-based infrastructure, for modern applications coming out of the hyperscalers, is incredibly quick. I mean, we watch new features and functions to come out all the time from our favorite online apps and our favorite online experiences, but we're not willing to wait years to watch a traditional retailer change their systems to meet our expectations. So when we don't get our expectations met, we go somewhere else. And if retailers don't want their customers to go somewhere else, they have to be able to innovate. And they really, and the obstacles to innovation are what I have in place. How do I change what I have in place quickly? How do I have what I have in place and meet these components? And you can't just snap your fingers and make legacy go away. So you have to find a way to be able to introduce new, while providing a bridge, a transition from legacy to new.
Yeah, and Megan, I'll add in here because I agree with Richard. I think the key word in your question was urgency. And there is this very much of how quickly can we add additional revenue, add more dollars to the bottom line, think about what's the next quarterly results that we have to deliver, how the speed at which the demand for improved business is bigger than ever. And at the same time, things like retail real estate can be challenging to find new spaces in A markets and B markets, and the malls are busy again, and the high street is busy again. And so now it's like there's this rush to kind of build the fleet of stores. Because if you think about the last kind of 10 years at scale, 10 years ago, kind of the D2C darlings, when you could buy a lot of Facebook ads and put a lot of money in, or I'd say minimal amount of money for a high customer acquisition, we all know that those days are over. And so now it's like, well, how do I acquire new customers? How do I retain customers? What does loyalty look like? What's my most valuable customer, which is often the one that shops both in the store and on my website. They return less in stores. So statistically, like financially, there's an urgency to build out the fleet. And so there is this very much of like, how do we use technology to do that? How do we continue to find new paths forward in profitability and in an urgent way?
Great points. Thank you both so much. Operational pain points grow more intense as retailers expand. Manual processes, inconsistent experiences, and fragmented inventory aren't problems that fade with scale. They get worse. So, Ron, what are the real-world obstacles that prevent teams from scaling efficiently?
So the number one, and I'll use one of the statistics from Richard's survey, is that inventory management. It said 32% of respondents named this as the top operational problem. And here's the situation as we sit toward the end of 2025. Most brands have reported inventory levels that are down. Some of that is tariff related. Some of that is being unsure about what Q4 is going to bring. What does holiday 2025 bring? There's a lot of questions on what's going to happen this year. And so the risk aversion of inventory management and potentially increase in pricing has put this very, I would just say, fragile part of operational efficiency pushed to its limits. And so things like that we've all become accustomed for, like buy online, pick up in store, ship from store, and understanding where all of your inventory sits in every location. How do I fill orders and use them as mini distribution centers? All of this, speed at which inventory is shipped, and then the speed at which inventory is returned. Because we know online purchases, particularly in the kind of fashion, beauty, home space, can be up to 40 to 50%. And so the inventory is always moving. The inventory sits in multiple locations, and it's a true operational pain point that I actually think is more urgent than ever today.
Richard, your thoughts?
Yeah, I totally agree with Ron. There's a couple. The base foundational to retail is the ability to provide a product and sell a product. So if you don't have the product to provide, if it's not in inventory, you can't sell it. If you can provide the product but can't, expedite the transaction, you're equally out of the water. And a point being is getting back to legacy. In the past, a single vendor provided monolithic solutions that did all of that in a very sort of a walled garden-based approach. But what we're talking about is integration with digital channels. We're talking about support for, functions like digital shelf labels to support dynamic pricing, to support, immediate and spontaneous promotions integrated within a store location to perhaps digital signage where you can, you can promote a product within a store. You can provide an incentive to that customer. That product has to be available, and the price of that product has to be reflected digitally. All those things are dynamic, and where previously that sort of that life cycle I just talked about that Ron was alluding to, that might be a multi-week process. Now all that's expected to happen in 5 minutes or less.
Yes.
Maybe 30 seconds. So to do that, you have to have agility within your systems. You're going to have different systems, no longer a monolithic system, but different systems that need to talk to each other, that need to communicate via APIs, that need to work the same way the back end of Google, Amazon, Facebook, Apple, and Netflix all work. These digital integrations. And again, some of this is the very painful process of old dog and new tricks. But the reality is it doesn't have to be quite like that. It's not about trying to teach an old POS system to behave differently, because it's not. It's much more about being able to do integration around and on that older POS system as it evolves and is replaced with a new set of services. Again, a substantial number of those running in the cloud, but an equally important part running within the four walls of the store.
Excellent, thank you. So we've touched then on some difficult operational challenges to navigate at scale. What about strategic challenges that leaders identified in the survey? Richard?
So this also gets very interesting because, again, as I said, very early on, the retail market is quite competitive, and all of our brands that we work with recognize that, and maintaining competitive position is extremely important to them. So they need to innovate, but it's not just about what happens in the physical store. It's also what happens in their entire ecosystem, which includes their products that they're providing. It improves how they're doing, marketing, and includes how how sales associates conduct themselves, how they're trained, how communications handled between the associate and the customer itself, and where they stand relative to, other brand partnerships, even, other retailers. So again, bringing that together, there are obviously a lot of sort of strategic thinking, but some of it, a good chunk of it now is reflected in how do you automate, how do you manage data, how do you collect information, how do you make that information available from a strategic standpoint back to senior leadership, down to the field soldiers, so they can make effective decisions immediately. And we could probably spend the rest of the webinar just talking about what it means to be able to get actionable data and how you can make smart decisions around it. But this is where there's so much promise from AI and machine learning to be able to distill down what is a incredibly complicated landscape of information into things that are actionable. But again, getting that data down and having it work within the store, getting that data down to the right people, whether it's someone within the stores, store management, or whether it's even a customer to make a decision is important. And this is something I think, Ron, you probably spent more time thinking about than most others in the market.
Thank you, Richard. And I do, because, when you talk about operational challenges, so much of it comes down to staffing. And I'll put, another one of your statistics out that says, talent shortage is a struggle. 41% of your respondents said talent shortage was one of their biggest operational challenges. I would challenge that as sometimes data and say it's actually not a staffing shortage, it's a turnover problem. Often the pace at which retail teams turn, some controllable, some not, really does put operational challenges back on implementation. So when we think about what Richard's describing of like new technology and speed and efficiency, that requires incredible execution at the field level. And if 41% of those surveyed say, but we don't have enough people, then we actually need to dig even further and say, well, what are your training and onboarding? What does the interview process look like? Is there a clear question? Is there a way that we can continue to retain and grow existing field employees? Because the idea of this kind of staff shortage and constant need to hire is one that will very much burn out a brand, particularly a smaller or franchise business that doesn't have all the HR support systems and all the functions that it requires sometimes to keep everything staffed. We have to think about this on also for smaller family-owned businesses and franchise businesses. How do you do that? And how do you continue to retain people? And my belief is very much that it is about training, onboarding, consistency, and clear career paths to next.
Great notes. Thank you. And just to reiterate an earlier point, these challenges only increase as locations expand and complexity intensifies. So in other words, if you don't get a handle on them now, they'll become more extreme and impactful. Technology can be a way to help you do that, future-proofing operations and sustaining growth. While the survey results show strong investment in core platforms like mobile POS, fraud detection, and contactless payments, these are table stakes in 2025. Are these investments that will drive real change, or is it time for retailers to step it up? Richard, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, the technology and building on what Ron was just discussing, they don't replace people. What they do is they take people, they make from a sales associate's job, they make them happier in the jobs they're in. It makes them more productive. It makes them less frustrated when done properly. And ancillary supporting technology, whether we're talking about something like mobile point of sale, being able to be out on the floor, working directly with customers versus behind a cash wrap, are just sort of table stakes at this point. If your business lends itself to the mobile point of sale experience, you're expected to implement it. And if you're going to implement it, and it's not a new technology at this point, it's been around for almost a decade, it needs to be implemented well. And if your implementation isn't done properly, then there's something very wrong. There's been a lot of lessons learned around that particular component. But what drives the decisions to whether to any of the new technologies, again, I mentioned electronic shelf labels. You brought up mobile point of sale. Not just contactless payment, but all kinds of, if you want to pay via a third-party payment provider like a Venmo or a PayPal, because your customers want that. All of those things need to be able to have ROI associated with them, and ROI is either going to mean you're saving money on your implementation, replacing some existing sets of costs, or you're going to gain some level of new sales. And actually, preferably, it should be both, and it should be significantly identifiable immediately. Some of the most cost-conscious retailers that we deal with have very strict rules around ROI. I mean, if they're not going to do something unless they can show that there's a case for doing it. And it needs to be very demonstratable. And often enough, what we've seen is you don't see it, in your POC. You don't see it in your one lab location. You don't see it in doing it in 5 stores. You have to have enough stores and enough eyes on it, and enough critical analysis of where the ROI is to come from to be able to really greenlight a transformational project.
Yeah, Megan, I would definitely agree with Richard on this idea, but I would also say, I have the luxury, as does Richard, of attending a lot of the big trade shows and seeing hundreds of new technology vendors, and some are small, some are big, and a lot of it can be that test and learn mentality. And so, as I mentioned earlier, I do see brands that are generally pretty slow to adopt. They're hesitant because they see the pace at which AI is evolving, that new things are happening all the time. So there's a little bit of like, well, let's wait and see what's going to happen, or let me attend NRF in January, see what's going on. And I would say now's the time to actually embrace some of these new ideas, these maybe smaller startup new technologies, many of which I advise, and get in and run a pilot, test a group of stores, and they'll do it for generally very low cost to you. And so you can have this mindset of legacy systems, things that have always worked, things that kind of are the glue that hold your business together, while simultaneously testing and learning and trying. And I think those brands that just kind of sit and wait and see and don't test and learn are going to be left behind. As we started this conversation, the customer expectation is changing. The customer expectation is moving quickly, and we as retailers have to move at the same pace, or the customer is going to find other options. And I think today we don't have a choice other than to move with this kind of test and learn mentality.
Excellent. Thank you so much. So let's talk about edge computing for a bit here then. Edge computing is becoming foundational to help retailers address much of what we've talked about and scale faster, securely, and reliably across locations. According to the survey, more than half of retailers have adopted or piloted systems, but commercial rollouts lag behind awareness. What are you both seeing where are you both seeing real impact from edge computing? Richard, we'll start with you.
Yeah, so now you're in my wheelhouse. So as I think it's becoming pretty, there's consensus in the industry around this. So edge computing represents the go forward way to deliver applications within the physical premises, within the stores, restaurants, or other locations. And as application complexity increases, so we're now talking about next generation AI and machine learning based systems, they need a place to run, and that's not going to be done on a traditional legacy stack. It's going to be done in a modern form. It's going to be done in an edge computing system. So the most innovative of the retailers out there have been deploying edge computing systems now for a little while. The ones that are very, very cautious are taking their time and trying to see who are the winners and losers of the overall market. But again, I'm not a prophet in saying this. Everyone is going to have some form of edge computing running within their stores. It's just a matter of time. And that time is not particularly long anymore. When I first started doing this back, in the mid 2010s, we had to wait a bit. It was a while before this was going to happen. The concept was brand new. There was a lot of education that had to happen over what does edge computing really consist of and what it does look like. But now I think we're having enough. We're just about there. Large, consultancies and thought leaders like Gartner and Forrester have identified edge computing. They're now talking about what it means. They're now picking, some of the companies that they feel are winning in that space, and other ones which are lagging. So it's gonna happen. But what does it really mean, practically speaking, to the retailer? What it means is you have a platform where you can deliver applications, not over months, not over years, but you can deliver a new application to 1,000 or 5,000 or even 10,000 locations in a day or two, or even less. You could touch all your locations in a single evening and make a change at scale. And that scale didn't exist before, but it's the same scale that people have become accustomed to with cloud-based infrastructure. And that's really important to get to some of what Ron was talking about earlier, the need to be able to adapt and try new things. It means you can deploy a new application, and if that application needs to change or be modified in some way, you can do it, within hours of deploying it. It means you have levels of resiliency and fault tolerance you didn't have previously, so operational reliability increases. And it can also mean, because you're able to deploy applications in frameworks that don't necessarily have to have dedicated physical systems each step of the way, your total cost of ownership for all this new infrastructure drops. It becomes easier to deploy and manage at scale. It becomes possible, not easier, it becomes just possible to deploy next generation applications that might require a GPU or might have AI and ML on it. And it also means that those new applications that you're talking about, which have that premise I discussed earlier, where things are communicating to each other, they're generating a lot of data, that data is being processed, that also becomes possible. Whereas before, it just really wasn't. So the largest of the retailers in the market, the big box operators, have treated their stores like mini data centers for a while. They had racks of equipment in a back room, with infrastructure that you'd see in a data center to support that. That ability, the ability to have clustered systems, to have network systems, to be able to have systems that operate, super efficiently, that's now available to everybody in the form of edge computing, which is why adoption of edge computing is accelerating to the extent it is right now. What it's about now is, what's my edge strategy? What am I implementing? And to get to what Ron said, what am I testing and trying?
And Megan, I wanted to add a couple of examples of where I see the conversations most common of what Richard's describing in edge computing. So kind of back where we started, of one of the biggest challenges today is inventory management. So the edge computing solution to that is RFID. And so I'm continuing to hear more and more brands say, I need to understand in a live way, not in a cloud data 24 hours later way. I need to understand immediately where every unit I own in the company sits. And that is a very powerful way to think about the future. When I think about edge computing and more brands using RFID, that has become an unlock, I think, for many, and will continue to grow. I think the other piece that is part of that customer expectation is, do you know who I am? And how quickly can you get to my purchase history recommendations that you may like while you're here? That's more of a one-on-one service model, but the more you can use immediate data to improve the customer experience, similarly to shopping online, that has all of your information and has your purchase history and is using all of the incredible technology available today to make recommendations. Brick and mortar retail hasn't done that at scale. And so edge computing gives you the opportunity then to say, how quickly can I get information and how quickly can I move, versus kind of waiting for checkout. And so I think there are so many interesting ways to think about the speed at which, again, business needs to be done, the speed at which the customer is thinking about this, and the technology and edge computing is what helps retailers meet those customer expectations.
Yeah, and Ron, I'll add one more thing just because it's so topical right now. But edge computing allows you to do, what might be, significant, and important data processing locally within the store. Yesterday, one of the major cloud providers had a multi-hour outage. And what did that mean for consumers? Well, I'm a consumer and I couldn't order one of the products that I wanted to go to it was a smoothie. I wanted to go order it and pick it up in my store location. I couldn't do it because the cloud was down. And there were other outages for folks that have largely, we'll call, cloud-based point of sale. In some cases, they were so impacted by this that they weren't able to do business. A customer would walk in and they couldn't process their order at all. They couldn't take their business. And that's really unacceptable. And when you look at what you want your technology stack to be going forward, if you're sort of banking on the fact that 90% of what you do is going to be in the cloud, you're going to see that 90% of your systems are going to be down when your cloud provider has an outage. So edge computing provides a really important function of handling, managing, processing, and running applications locally, and making sure the cloud is leveraged where it should be. But where business is being done, you have the ability to deliver compute and deliver, manage, and run applications locally.
Excellent insights. Thank you so much. We are nearing the end of our time together, but before we get to some audience questions, I would like to talk about actionable advice. So what priorities should retail leaders be focused on to drive growth and resilience as they scale? And this is your chance to give attendees some, real-world guidance that they can apply immediately. Ron, we'll start with you.
Sure. I love this question because often adoption to new technology at the field level, so you think the majority of all of this technology that we speak about is used by 80% of your workforce, sometimes more, delivering at least 80% of the revenue for the company. And often the step that's missed in making decisions is asking the field what they need. And so I think the best decisions are those that are collaborative with field leaders, so at the store level, multi-store level, regional level, that are collaborative with what do they need, what is their customer expecting, what would be some easy solutions, and that we do this together. And often companies make decisions about new technology without consulting the end user. Talk to the end user, learn more about what they're struggling with, and then go find the solution to help them solve that problem, not the other way around. And so like you go to a show like an NRF, and I speak to brands that have a shopping list of new technologies that they're looking for. And my question or challenge to them often is, well, who told you you needed this? Well, I heard that this is what we needed to do. And so I'm always well, how many stores did you visit before you put this on your shopping list? And so that's, for me, the actionable advice is go speak to the end user and see if this is something that they need and want today. And then that collaborative approach is cross-functional in every department. And so often new technology is siloed into, maybe it's in buying planning, or it's finance with a large learning model. Maybe it is in visual merchandising, or like there are silos that sometimes technology works in. I think at this point, we know enough to say, let's loop everybody in about what the challenges are, including the field. Let's see where technology can actually serve multiple purposes, so that from a cost efficiency point of view, everyone's winning. And then go find those solutions that are available at every show. Go learn and listen and really do things that people need and want today that will very much improve your business. And don't just chase the shiny object, which is, I think, what we've done a lot the last 10 years. I think we're ready to put some strategy behind this.
Richard, what about you?
Yeah, so a couple things. So building on what Ron was saying, don't be afraid to try new things. Don't be afraid to experiment. A lot of, unfortunately, in our market, we see a lot of, a lot of Me Tooism. So they see, one retailer does something, and their peer competitors all jump on doing the same thing, because without necessarily knowing it was successful or not. My favorite example of any of that, of course, is what we used to call, the Apple moments, when back when Apple opened its retail stores, someone from the C-suite of another retailer would be going Apple, computer shopping because their daughter was going off to college, and they would have a transformational retail experience in the Apple store for the first time. They would then march back in, bringing all their IT people together into a conference room and say, why aren't our stores more like that? And there'd be a scramble to do it. Another good example, of course, and Ron and I were chatting about this, prior to starting this webinar, was the experience that a lot of retailers had with self-checkout coming out of COVID. They had, it was tough to get people to work because, again, of the labor dynamics. So they were understaffed. Self-checkout was deemed to be the answer, and there was a mad rush for a lot of retailers to implement self-checkout. So they did, and when they then found out that, one, their customers hated it, and two, levels of shrink exploded. So we got a lot of phone calls too then, because they said, well, we want to have new systems that'll stop the shrink. I hear edge computing and computer vision will fix all that stuff. And of course, we would say there's lots of opportunity, but it's not in a vacuum. These systems have to be integrated. You have to understand what's really driving the behavior. You have to think about it. But the net is, we're now enough years past COVID. I think the right balance has happened. I think there's still plenty of room for improvement in some of those core technologies. But again, it should be so much more focused on the customer experience. Like, what of this suite of new technologies that are available to you, what is going to really improve customer experience? And the best way to do that is to ask. And with all that said, a couple other just sort of basic best practices that we recommend are, one, challenge vendor lock-in. This is very important. And it could be vendor lock-in from the large point of sale providers who are telling you that we have a monolithic set of applications. You buy one and then you get them all, but we're going to charge you incrementally along the way, and you don't have the opportunity to do best of breed. Challenge that. Don't accept it. Second thing can happen with infrastructure. The cloud providers would love for you to jump onto their technology stacks and then leverage their proprietary features and functions, but pretty soon you find yourself locked in. And that's not great, particularly as the aforementioned outage happened. If you said, hey, look, I don't like this. I want to be multi-cloud. I want to be hybrid cloud, but I find that the applications and systems I implemented are now totally cloud dependent. Again, not great. That problem, by the way, for anyone's listening, is even worse when you start talking about AI and ML. Every one of the cloud providers has cool, leverageable technologies to build, ML-based applications, but please do not get locked in. What works in the cloud doesn't necessarily work in the store. Maintain best of breed, understand how these things work, and control your infrastructure. And then the last thing is, what makes all this stuff work and work like magic is, having an open systems based approach. So avoid proprietary, solutions. Avoid solutions when you're implementing something new, and this applies to our technology as much as anyone else out there. Understand, what is my path to change if I need to? Is this something that's going to be easy for me to do, hard for me to do? How much leverage do I have over the vendor that I'm in love with right now? Because there's always the honeymoon period, but you want to be able to have an approach which allows you to gain as much value out of the technology you're implementing, but also hopefully will allow you to keep your options open going forward. And again, understand, and I started the conversation with this, I'll close it with this: understand your ROI, understand your total cost of ownership. Look deeply at those things. When we're engaged with customers, that's the winning formula for us. When we can demonstrate, reduce total cost of ownership, we can demonstrate a very short runway to real ROI. It makes the decisions, it makes the investment really easy.
Really great advice, both of you. Thank you so much, Ron and Richard, for an amazing discussion today. We do have a few minutes left, so I'd love to take some questions from our audience. And again, if you have a question for our speakers, just drop it in the Q&A widget. We will get through as many questions as we can, but if we don't get to your question today, we will follow up with you via email. So our first one, Richard, I'll send your way. It asks, what's the first step for a retailer looking to implement edge computing across multiple locations?
Well, the first thing is to be educated about what edge computing is, what it would mean to you and your business, to understand what the costs of it are going to be, and to understand, at least get an idea of who some of the leading providers of edge computing solutions in the market are. Once you've got the landscape down, then understand how you're going to use and leverage it. There's going to be multiple opportunities. We've have customers that have implemented an edge computing based stack, and the day one benefit they got out of that was the ability to take their legacy systems basically unchanged and achieve high availability and significantly faster return to service. For some of those, what that meant was a significant drop in truck rolls, a significant drop in field replacement of systems, and much, much more uptime in general, which again, downtime is the enemy of any retailer. When your systems are down, typically you can't transact either in whole or in parts, so you want to avoid that. And then the other aspect to it is it's not just about, of course, supporting legacy. So understanding what new business applications, what new software architectures look like, understanding, basic concepts such as container-based application delivery, telemetry, pipelines, enhanced observability, and of course, what an open systems-based approach looks like relative to, I suddenly have all this available data. I'm suddenly managing and connecting to IoT-based systems. And most importantly, in a lot of cases, where is AI and ML going? How do I run that locally? What are some of the easy wins within my stores? What vendors, what application providers are interested in me? And how do I have an overall strategy?
Excellent. Thank you so much. Our next question, Ron, I'll send your way. How do you get executive buy-in for more ambitious tech upgrades when budgets are tight?
So interesting, because just recently I interviewed the CTO of a very large footwear brand, doesn't matter who it is, and they had exactly this challenge. They had a very legacy POS system, poor inventory management understanding. Every part of it just felt like they could not move at the pace. And the way that they got buy-in into a beautiful new upgrade, which was, kind of to Richard's point, no one wants to go down. They had very limited amount of downtime in order to execute this, was the buy-in from every single department across the company, again, including the field. So the way that you get that is, what's the speed to delivery? Exactly what Richard was saying. How quickly will this be up and running? What's the ROI on the business? Does this improve efficiency? Does this help us capture more customers? Will this increase the average transaction? All of the data that you need to prove a financial point is how you get the buy-in from every department across, is financially. And financially, and then efficiency at the field. With this particular retailer, had things like coupons that were being used. They had a company credit card that they used. It's their every layer of complexity said, let's not just solve for what we need today, but let's solve for 5 years from now, 10 years from now. We can't really think beyond that from a technology solution right now, but what does 5 years from now look like in our business? And let's make sure we're solving at least for that today. And his story was really interesting about how they did that and who his partners were to make it happen. And it was very cross-functional.
Perfect. Thank you so much. I think we've got time for one more, and I believe that we touched on this during our discussion, but perhaps there's a way to dig deeper here. But how do we ensure that tech adoption sticks? Richard, would you like to take this one?
Yes, this is again one of the we've seen this movie before. There's a cool technology. Time is spent on design. Time is spent on implementation. You spend time in the lab. You spend time in a POC store. And then you go to rollouts, and then the problems start to mount. So you start ending up with challenges. And so those usually fall into two categories. So one of which is what works in a very small sample size, especially in the type of next generation technologies we're talking about, often doesn't work or can't work or has to work differently when you start to talk about running it at scale. So we brought that into two different buckets. So one, there's the vendor that's proposed a technology, a vendor partner that you like and respect, but they can't really demonstrate that they can run their solution at scale. You don't want to be the first one to take a vendor from 100 stores to 1,000. Typically, there'll be lessons learned. There'll be stuff that they didn't really tell you about that you're going to find out pretty quickly when you start to scale. So again, we've seen this in legacy, we've seen this in new, but once you get past sort of that little magical, I've got 5 or 10 stores running in my pilot and everything looks good, and bam, you hit these walls of either reliability or bugs you didn't encounter or operational inefficiencies. They're terrible, and they can be, a lot of it's very avoidable, again, with the right level of analysis going in. How do I patch? How do I maintain? How do I secure? How do I manage? Again, many of these systems, especially microservices, involve a lot of additional complexity that some organizations aren't used to before. So if you don't have a framework for doing it, it can be challenging. The second aspect of it, outside of just the technology itself, is, again, another area that Ron and I love talking about, which is the field and how do folks actually using the technology react to it, both the field, the associates, as well as the customers. Seen this a million times before. Look great in a small sample size, but once at scale, the training wasn't there, the monitoring wasn't there, the usability wasn't what they needed. A process that maybe a sales associate did in a store, which took 45 seconds, suddenly becomes 3 or 4 minutes. Or maybe it's a process that is a 20-minute process that they're used to doing, suddenly takes multiple hours. All those things are massive barriers to adoption, and they can mean we're stopping the project. We have to refactor. We have to go back. And again, I guess this would be another area I should probably do a survey on it. It's a little tough, but it's one of those things where 3 out of every 5 technology projects tend to hit some level of friction. What are those? Where do they happen, and why do they fail? It's usually in these details.
Thank you, Ron. Anything you want to add there?
I absolutely agree. Talk to the field. Get their feedback on process and change and need and how they will adopt this, and just double down on Richard. Don't need to repeat that.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much. Today we have covered a critical topic, the need for multi-location retailers to modernize their operations, overcome scaling challenges, deliver consistent customer experience, and unlock new growth with more resilient technology strategies. Thank you, Richard and Ron, for your valuable insights today, and thank you to our audience for joining us. If you want to learn how scale computing can help you accelerate your journey towards scalable growth, get in touch with them using the links in the resource section. Finally, just remember that today's webinar will be available on demand. You'll receive an email with a link to rewatch or share with your colleagues. Thank you for joining us, and have a great day.